My son texted me the night before Thanksgiving and told me I wasn't welcome at my own family's dinner. His wife added her own line right under his, telling me maybe one day I'd earn a seat at their table. I read it twice, put the phone down, and opened my banking app instead. I canceled every single payment I had been quietly covering for them for 3 years. 1 hour later, my phone lit up with 95 missed calls. My name is Walter Higgins. I'm 64 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and for a long time I thought being a good father meant never saying no. This is the story of the Thanksgiving that changed all of that. I spent 31 years managing the parts counter at an auto supply store on the east side of Columbus, the same store where I met my wife Carol when she came in looking for windshield wipers and stayed to talk for 45 minutes. We got married 11 months later and raised one son together, Derek, in a small brick house on Redbud Lane that I still live in today. Carol passed 4 years ago from a heart problem nobody saw coming, and after that, Derek became the only family I had left that really mattered to me. I am not a rich man. I never was. But I always believed that if my boy needed something and I had it to give, I gave it. No questions, no conditions, no lecture about responsibility. That was just how I loved him. When he was a kid, I skipped fishing trips so I could pay for his cleats. When he got older, I skipped a vacation so I could help with his community college tuition. None of that ever felt like a sacrifice to me. It felt like the whole point of having a son in the first place. Derek grew into a hard-working man, started his own landscaping business right out of his 20s, and for a few good years, things looked like they were finally paying off for him. He met a woman named Brooke at a wedding, and within a year they were married. And within 2 more years they had a house with a 2-car garage and a mortgage bigger than anything I ever signed my name to in my whole life. I liked Brooke well enough in the beginning. I told myself the small things I noticed didn't matter. I was wrong about that, but it would take me 3 more years and 1 Thanksgiving to finally understand exactly how wrong. Derek's landscaping business had one bad winter, the kind that snaps a small company in half if you're not careful, and his was not careful enough to survive it without help. 3 years ago, in late January, he called me at 8 or at night and I could hear in his voice before he even said the words that something was badly wrong. 2 of his biggest contracts fell through when a development project got canceled. Equipment broke down at the worst possible time, and he was staring down a mortgage payment, 2 car loans, and a business line of credit all coming due the same week. He didn't ask me directly. Derek was never good at asking directly. He just laid it all out and let the silence sit there until I offered, and I offered everything because that's what a father does when his son is drowning and reaching for the side of the pool. I pulled money from my retirement account. More than I probably should have, and I didn't just give him a lump sum and walk away. I set up a system because I wanted to make sure it actually helped, instead of disappearing into whatever hole opened up next. I connected directly to their mortgage servicer and set a recurring transfer to cover the difference between what they could afford and what the house actually cost every month. Since Derek's credit was wrecked from a late business loan, I co-signed both of their car loans, his truck, and Brooke's leased Lexus, with the payments coming straight out of my checking account. I even put the family cell phone plan under my own name and my own card because his carrier account had been suspended for non-payment. I told myself this was temporary, a bridge to get them back on solid ground. I never once thought about what would happen if the bridge became the whole road. For a while, it worked the way I hoped it would. Derek rebuilt his client list, brought on 2 employees, and by the following spring his business was doing better than it had in years. I kept the payments running anyway because nobody ever brought up stopping them, and I figured that was just how things were now between us. Quiet help nobody mentioned out loud. What I didn't expect was how Brooke's attitude toward me would shift once she understood I wasn't just a father-in-law anymore. I was the man keeping their whole lifestyle standing upright. She stopped asking me over on random Sundays the way she used to in the first year of their marriage. She started introducing me to her friends as Derek's father, never once as family, like there was a careful line she needed people to see. At her sister's wedding, I sat at a table near the coat check while Brooke's parents sat at the head table beside the newlyweds. And when I mentioned it felt strange, she laughed it off and said I was reading into seating charts that didn't mean anything. Little things piled up the way little things do. She corrected my grammar in front of guests. She once told a room full of her friends that my old pickup truck parked in their driveway made the whole street look like a repair shop. Derek would sometimes catch my eye across the room when she said things like that, and I could see him deciding every single time that keeping the peace at home was worth more to him than standing up for his own father. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I wasn't doing any of this to be thanked, but a man can only tell himself that so many times before some part of him starts keeping score whether he wants to or not. Thanksgiving became the clearest window into how things had changed if I'd only been willing to look through it sooner. The first year after Carol passed, Derek insisted I come to their house so I wouldn't spend the holiday alone in that quiet brick house on Redbud Lane, and I appreciated that more than he probably ever knew. That first year felt normal, a real family dinner, me at the table with everyone else. My grandson Mason still in a high chair banging a spoon against the tray. But every year after that, something small got quieter or smaller without anyone announcing it. The second year, Brooke's parents came too, and the dining room table suddenly wasn't big enough. So a folding table appeared in the kitchen doorway for me and the kids, close enough to hear the real conversation, but far enough to know I wasn't part of it. The third year, I brought a homemade apple pie the way Carol used to make it, and Brooke thanked me politely, set it on the counter, and served her mother's store-bought pumpkin pie instead. The good one, she called it, without seeming to notice what that implied. I still paid their mortgage difference every month. I still paid both car payments and the phone bill without missing a single cycle. Nobody at that table ever mentioned any of it out loud, and I never brought it up either, because bringing it up felt like keeping score on love. And I didn't want to be that kind of man. I wanted to be the kind of father who gave freely. What I didn't understand yet was that giving freely and being treated like you don't matter can happen in the exact same house at the exact same table in the very same year. This year, I decided I was going to do things a little differently. And looking back now, I think some part of me already sensed something was coming even before I understood what it was. I called Derek 2 weeks before Thanksgiving just to ask what time to arrive and whether Brooke wanted me to bring the apple pie again or something new instead. He sounded distracted on the phone, said he'd check with Brooke and call me back, which he never did. Not once in those 2 weeks, not even when I texted him a friendly reminder, 4 days before the holiday. I told myself he was just busy with the business picking up again, and I didn't want to be the kind of father who nagged his grown son over a dinner reservation. I bought the ingredients anyway. Good apples from the farmer's market on 3rd Street, real butter, the kind of cinnamon Carol always insisted on instead of the cheap store brand. And I spent a whole Saturday afternoon comparing recipe cards in her old handwriting like I was studying for a test I couldn't afford to fail. I wrapped small gifts for my grandkids, Mason and little Lily, a toy truck and a stuffed rabbit I picked out myself at a shop downtown, and I set them on my kitchen counter next to the pie ingredients, feeling something close to excitement for the first time in a while. The kind of feeling I hadn't let myself sit in fully since Carol passed. I even ironed my good blue shirt, the one Carol always said brought out my eyes, and hung it on the closet door 2 days early so it would be ready, checking on it more than once like a teenager getting ready for a first date instead of a grown man getting ready for Thanksgiving dinner with his own family. I had no idea, sitting in my quiet kitchen, that Tuesday night with flour on the counter and gifts, wrapped in cheerful paper, that the next message I got from my son would be the one that finally opened my eyes to everything I had been refusing to see for 3 straight years. The message came in at 9:47 on Wednesday night, the evening before Thanksgiving, while I was standing at my kitchen counter peeling apples for a pie nobody had confirmed they wanted. My phone buzzed against the counter and I saw Derek's name on the screen and smiled before I even opened it, thinking it was finally the details about tomorrow. Maybe even an apology for going quiet the past 2 weeks. Instead, it read, "Dad, Thanksgiving is family only this year. You aren't invited." I stood there holding a half-peeled apple, reading it 3 times, waiting for the rest of the message that would explain the joke or the misunderstanding. But nothing else came. No laughing emoji, no follow-up correcting a typo, nothing. A minute later, a second message appeared. This one from Brooke's number, since she had apparently asked Derek for the phone or typed it herself right under his. It said, "Maybe one day you'll earn a seat at our table. Walter." I read those two messages standing in my own kitchen, surrounded by apples I had bought for a pie, gifts I had wrapped for grandchildren I loved more than anything, and a blue shirt hanging on my closet door for a dinner I was now being told I hadn't earned my way into. Something in my chest went very still and very quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before a man finally understands something he's been avoiding for a long, long time. The kind of quiet where every folding table and every store-bought pie from the last 3 years suddenly lined up in a row and made perfect, painful sense. I set the peeler down on the counter, wiped my hands on the dish towel Carol had embroidered years ago, and stood there for a moment just breathing. I did not call Derek. I did not type out a single angry word or ask what I had done to deserve this. I simply typed back one sentence, "Understood," and I left the family group chat entirely, then opened my banking app and started scrolling through every single recurring payment attached to my account. I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop instead of my phone because I wanted to see everything, clearly, in full, one line at a time, the way Carol always did our family budget back when she was alive. I pulled up 3 years of statements and started writing numbers on a legal pad the old-fashioned way because seeing it in my own handwriting made it feel real in a way a screen never could. The mortgage difference I've been covering for their house came to just over $1,100 a month. Derek's truck payment was $480. Brooke's leased Lexus was $610, more than my own truck payment had ever been in its entire life. The family phone plan under my name ran $220 a month for 4 lines, 3 of which I had never once touched myself. I added it up slowly, and the number sitting at the bottom of that legal pad came to just under $26,000 a year. Money pulled straight from a retirement account I had already dipped into further than any financial advisor would have recommended. $26,000 a year for 3 years running so that a man could tell me I wasn't allowed at his table, and his wife could tell me maybe someday I'd earn the right to sit there. I thought about Carol, about how she used to say that love should never come with a leash on it, but it also should never be handed to someone who uses it like a weapon against you. I thought about every folding table in that kitchen doorway, every store-bought pie that replaced mine, every comment about my old truck, and sitting there at my own kitchen table in my own house that I owned free and clear, I made a decision that had absolutely nothing to do with anger and everything to do with finally respecting myself. I opened my bank's website first and found the recurring transfer set up to their mortgage servicer, the one I had scheduled myself 3 years earlier during that January phone call that started all of this. I clicked cancel, confirmed it, and watched the screen show me a little green checkmark like it was nothing more than canceling a magazine subscription. Next, I called the auto loan company for Derek's truck, gave them my account number, and told the woman on the phone I wanted to remove myself as the authorized payer effective immediately, since the loan itself was still in his name and mine only as a co-signer covering the monthly draft. She processed it in under 4 minutes without asking a single question about why. I did the same for Brooke's Lexus lease, calling the leasing company directly and pulling my card off the account entirely, which meant the next payment would have nowhere to draw from at all unless somebody else's card was on file, which I already knew it wasn't. Last, I called the phone carrier, and since the entire plan was under my name and my card, I simply told them I wanted to close the account, all 4 lines, effective that night if possible. The representative asked if I was sure, since it would disconnect service immediately for all lines involved, and I told her yes, I was very sure, more sure than I had been about anything in a long time. I hung up the phone, set it face down on the table next to my legal pad full of numbers, and looked at the apple peeler still sitting where I'd left it. For the first time in 3 years, my chest didn't feel tight. It felt like I could finally breathe all the way down to the bottom of my lungs. I didn't feel triumphant that night, and I want to be honest about that, because revenge in the movies always looks like something loud and satisfying, and this didn't feel like that at all. It felt more like setting down something heavy I'd been carrying so long my arms had forgotten what it felt like to hang free at my sides. I finished peeling the apples anyway because I had already bought them, and I wasn't going to let good fruit go to waste over a family fight. And I made the pie just for myself, filling the whole house with the smell of cinnamon and butter, The way it used to smell when Carol was alive and baking on a Wednesday night for no reason at all, except that she felt like it. I set the finished pie on the counter to cool, wiped down the counter, and sat at my kitchen table for a long while just looking at it, feeling strangely peaceful for a man who had just torn apart 3 years of quiet arrangements in under 20 minutes. I wrapped Mason's toy truck and Lily's stuffed rabbit and set them on the shelf in the hall closet, deciding I'd figure out what to do with them later once some of the dust settled, because none of what happened tonight was ever about punishing 2 kids who didn't ask for any of it. I turned my own phone to silent around 11:00 that night, not out of spite, but because I genuinely wanted one quiet, undisturbed night of sleep for the first time in longer than I could remember. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling in the dark, thinking about Carol, wondering what she would have said if she'd seen those 2 messages light up my phone in my own kitchen. I decided she would have been proud of me, not for canceling anything out of anger, but for finally, after 3 long years, choosing myself. I fell asleep somewhere around midnight, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't wake up once until morning. I woke up Thanksgiving morning around 7:00, made coffee, and let my phone sit face down on the counter while I ate a slice of the pie I'd baked the night before. Plain, no plans, no folding table waiting for me anywhere. When I finally turned the phone over around 8:30, the screen nearly lit up my whole kitchen. 95 missed calls, most of them from Derek, a good number from Brooke, and a few from numbers I didn't recognize at all, which I later learned belonged to the mortgage servicer and the leasing company trying to reach the account holder about a payment that never went through. There were 11 voicemails and 40 some odd text messages stacked on top of each other, starting confused and turning more frantic with every single one. The earliest ones from Derek asked simple questions. "Dad, why did my truck insurance company call saying there's a payment issue?" Then they got more specific. "Dad, Brooke's phone just says no service. Is something wrong with the account?" By mid-morning, the messages had turned into something closer to panic. "Dad, please call me back. This isn't funny anymore. The mortgage company left a message about a missed payment, and I don't understand what's happening." Brooke had sent her own string of messages too, though hers read less like confusion and more like a woman realizing the ground under her feet had quietly disappeared sometime overnight. Each one a little shorter and a little more frightened than the last, ending with one that simply said, "Please, we need to talk today." I read every single message slowly, standing at my kitchen counter in my socks, coffee going cold beside me, letting each one land fully before I moved on to the next. And I felt something I hadn't expected to feel at all, watching 95 missed calls pile up on a screen. I felt calm. Completely, entirely calm. Like a man who had finally set down a weight he'd been carrying so long he forgot it wasn't supposed to be his to carry alone. Around 11:00 that morning, I heard tires in my driveway before I heard the knock, and I already knew who it was before I even looked out the window. Derek's truck was parked at an angle like he'd stopped it in a hurry, half on the grass, and both he and Brooke came up my front walk fast, Brooke a step ahead of him, her face doing something between anger and fear that I honestly hadn't seen on her in all the years I'd known her. I opened the door before they could knock a second time, still in my socks, still holding the same cold cup of coffee from earlier. "Dad, what did you do?" Derek said, his voice cracking somewhere between a grown man and the same scared boy who used to call me from that landscaping business 3 winters ago. "I did exactly what you asked me to do," I said, keeping my voice level and calm in a way that seemed to unsettle both of them more than shouting ever could have. Brooke stepped forward before Derek could answer, her arms crossed tight over her chest like she was holding herself together. "Walter, this is insane. You cut off the mortgage payment, the cars, everything, all because of one text message." I looked at her for a long moment before I answered, letting the silence stretch just long enough that she had to stand in it. "It wasn't one text message, Brooke," I said. "It was 3 years of folding tables in the kitchen doorway, and store-bought pies and comments about my truck, and then finally you telling me I hadn't earned a seat at a table I'd been quietly paying for the entire time." Her face went pale in a way I hadn't seen before, the exact color of someone doing math they should have done a long time ago. And finally getting the answer. I invited them inside because Redbud Lane never turns family away at the door, even family that just spent 3 years forgetting I was family too. And we sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd written that legal pad full of numbers less than 24 hours earlier, the pad still sitting there in plain view for both of them to see. Derek looked like he hadn't slept, and honestly, I felt for him because I don't think my son ever set out to hurt me. I think he just got comfortable letting somebody else make the hard decisions in his marriage while he stayed quiet in the background. I told them both the truth, plainly, the way Carol always said a man should speak when it actually mattered. No shouting, no dramatics, just facts laid out one after another. I told them I never once regretted helping them through that terrible winter, and I never wanted a single thank you for it. But I also never expected to be told I hadn't earned a seat at a table I was literally keeping standing every single month. I looked at Brooke directly and told her that respect isn't something a father-in-law has to audition for while he's quietly paying your mortgage. And if she wanted a family that owed her nothing, she was welcome to build one, just not with my money underneath it holding the whole thing up. Derek finally spoke up in a way I hadn't heard from him in years, telling Brooke in front of me that she'd gone too far this time, that his father had never once asked for anything back, and he was ashamed it took losing the phone plan for him to finally say so out loud. Brooke cried at my kitchen table, not performing tears, real ones, the kind that come when a person finally sees themselves clearly and doesn't like what's looking back at them. I didn't turn every payment back on that day, and I want to be honest about that too, because forgiveness and financial rescue are two completely different things. And I wasn't ready to confuse them again just because two people showed up scared on my doorstep. I told Derek I would help him personally set up a real budget, one that didn't depend on his father's retirement account holding up his entire lifestyle, and he agreed without a single complaint, which told me more about how scared that morning had made him than any apology could have. I reactivated the phone line for Mason's tablet, so the kids weren't affected by any of this, since none of it was ever about punishing two little kids who didn't ask to be born into their parents' choices. But I left the rest exactly as it was, at least for the time being. Brooke called me 2 days later on her own. No Derek standing beside her and told me she was sorry. Not the kind of sorry that comes with an excuse attached, just a plain, quiet sorry, and asked if I would come over the following Sunday for a real dinner. Not a folding table dinner, an actual seat at the actual table. I said I would think about it, and I meant it, because trust rebuilds slower than a bank account refills, and I wasn't going to pretend 3 years disappeared over one phone call and a good apology. Derek's business, it turned out, was doing well enough on its own now that most of what I'd been covering wasn't even necessary anymore. They just never bothered checking because the money kept quietly showing up every single month like magic. And nobody ever stops to question magic while it's still working in their favor. I went to that Sunday dinner 2 weeks later, and I noticed the second I walked in that there was no folding table anywhere in sight. Just one table, one family. My seat right between Mason and Lily like it should have been every single Thanksgiving for the last 3 years. Brooke served the food herself that night, and near the end of dinner she quietly set a slice of homemade apple pie in front of me, made from scratch using real butter, nothing store-bought about it at all. She didn't say much about it, and I didn't either, but we both understood exactly what that pie meant sitting there on the table between us. A small, quiet apology in the shape of dessert. I still live in the same small brick house on Redbud Lane, and I still keep Carol's picture on the mantel where she can see the whole living room. And some nights I tell her out loud how the whole thing turned out. The way I used to tell her everything when she was still here to listen to me talk. I never went back to paying anyone's mortgage or car payment or phone bill again. Not because I stopped loving my son, but because I finally understood that real love doesn't get a bank account attached to it to prove itself. And any table worth sitting at should want you there for free, not because you're useful. These days, when Thanksgiving comes around, nobody texts me the night before to tell me where I stand in my own family. I just show up, the same way I always should have been allowed to, as exactly who I am. Nothing owed, nothing earned, just family sitting together at one table, the way it was always supposed to be from the very beginning, long before any of this ever needed to happen at all.